Gotta fix your makeup.
Gotta get the background on. I forget that it's not automatic every single time.
Hi, Jasmine. Just wanted to let you know I was just sitting in to observe a portion of the meeting because I know we're not on the agenda for tonight, but
Okay,
to stay up to date. Good to see everybody.
good to see you.
Thank you.
Oh, Jonathan, we're live on YouTube. I'm going to start recording now.
All right, great. Well, at this point, I believe we are ready to call to order. With that said, does anybody want to volunteer and do the Pledge of Allegiance? If not, I can lead it. Okay. Jasmine, can you pull it up, please?
Yes.
Just so everybody's on the same page.
Laptop's going a little slow.
It's all right.
Let me know when you can see my screen. Sorry about that. Hold on.
For those of you just joining, we're about to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay.
There we go.
I can make it bigger too.
All right, team. Count of three. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for putting the words up so everybody could see it. Roll call wise. So Jasmine, I'm not sure, do you do the roll call or do I do the roll call? How does that work?
You can do it or I can do it.
Yeah, I have the names here.
Okay.
Sheila Demir. Okay, I don't see her, not present. Krupa Desai.
Present.
Great. Alexander Moore. I don't see him. Shannon Morton.
Present.
Great, Shannon. Jorge Saparek.
Present.
Great. Giselle Washington.
Present.
Great. Jonathan Wilson is present. Daniel Zamilpa.
Present.
And then Marcus Wilson Smith. I thought I saw him earlier, but we'll mark him not present. In addition, please note for the record, we have a few others. We have Jasmine Duckworth. We have Paulo Casparat. I hope I pronounced that name right. I'm sorry. Diane Burby. And we have Zakiah Wright and Julia Wilson and John Leonard. At this point, I'd like to ask the question, does anybody want to call a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes, Zamilpa.
Do we have a second?
I'll second. Just
Great.
aye.
For all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Sorry, really quickly, Jonathan, we have to do roll call for all the action items.
Oh, okay, sorry. So rather than that, let's go through just to make sure that we have consensus. So,
And I can do that part if it's easier.
okay, good.
Okay. Jonathan Wilson,
Approve.
Krupa Desai,
Approve.
Daniel Zamilpa,
Aye.
Giselle Washington,
Approve.
Jorge Sefarok,
Approve.
Shannon Morton.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great, exciting. We do have a speaker today for the public, and we're on item number 5 of our agenda. In advance, Michael, and I'm going to ask you to pronounce your last name, but I think it's Wolkolovich. Would you be willing to speak on behalf of the West Hollywood Community Housing Corporation?
No, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Housing Corporation.
Okay.
I'm speaking on behalf as a resident of the city of West Hollywood.
Okay, so we're open to hearing your voice. You have 2 minutes for speaking.
May I first clarify whether it's 2 minutes or 3 minutes as for other commissions and advisory boards?
We have done 2 minutes according to our agenda. So if you'd like an extra minute, we can have a motion that we can ask to extend. So
Okay, I'll try for 2, but I'm likely to approach 3. So good evening, subcommittee and staff. Michael Wojtkiewicz. Although this marks the first time that I've given comment before this body, I have listened to proceedings by this subcommittee before. Since choosing to speak today, and as this panel falls upon the 4th Wednesday of every month, it is worthy to note come October, there will only be 5 days left remaining within a month recognized for disability awareness when next you meet. Thus, as this task force on justice was created to increase engagement and amplify the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color within West Hollywood, all the while advising on social and equality issues, but at the same time, perhaps unknowingly and regrettably not recognizing the systematic inequities that exist if one is simply found lower in social economic standards and or having disability, the following question is put forward. As a task force, what collectively would find consideration should any issue of building code were ever based upon a person's color or ethnicity? I am not speaking on standards via fair housing, where it is illegal for housing providers such as landlords, property managers, real estate agents, brokers, mortgage lenders, and insurance companies to treat someone differently because of race or ethnicity. Instead, I am speaking of codes, municipal, state, and federal, related to issues pursuant to building and safety. For the record, building and safety codes do not take into consideration race and or ethnicity. They do, however, take into account disability via standards related to accessibility. Last week, a City Council agenda item included review on the draft report for the housing element update, which again reasserted claim West Hollywood enforces the requirements of Title 24 of the California Code of Regulations, which govern access and adaptability of buildings to accommodate persons with disabilities. This is sadly and simply not true. It is, however, ever more important certain truths and facts are finally recognized not only by City Council, but by the greater public, including this body, which represents West Hollywood. A report issued only in draft form some years ago found a documented 60 violations of applicable accessibility code within one singular new building for those disabled. Perhaps
Michael?
this is why yes.
Michael, sorry, that was 2 minutes. Do you mind if we just ask if there's anyone else on Zoom who is interested in making public comment? If there's not, then we can definitely give you another minute.
Is anybody else willing to, does anybody else want to speak from a public perspective? Motion to have Michael continue.
Approved.
May I start?
Zamilpa.
Oh,
Okay, please continue.
okay. So perhaps this is why the unfinished report was not only stopped in its tracks, but never publicly vetted by City Council. So I ask you all, in this pivotal time of social and racial inflection, if this body is truly about justice, social, racial, economic, or otherwise, again, what would you do if building code was based upon a person's race? Would each of you ignore violations of code just as the city has done in terms of code related to accessibility and life safety within a building for those lower income and living with disabilities? Would you not go back and try to fix what remains so wrong to this very day? Thank you so much for the extra time, and have a good evening.
So I want to say thank you for your comments. Greatly respect your journey and advocacy. There are a couple of different areas within the city of West Hollywood that we've dedicated to addressing the needs of disabilities, in addition to taking into account from a BIPOC perspective. There's a disabilities advisory board. Within that, there's also several commissions that are built on public facilities, planning, and then within the city of West Hollywood, there is an area that's focused on building safety. So, while we are focused on the BIPOC initiative, it's not at the cost of any other group. And that's my response to you, but I do want to say I applaud you for the time that you took today, and thank you for that. Anybody else want to make additional comments?
So really quickly, we can staff or John or either one of us can respond to Michael after the meeting. Simply just because public comment is usually just reserved for folks to address the social justice task force. We don't want to get into a back and forth. So we can definitely follow up with Michael if he wants.
Michael, would that be okay? Can we follow up with you offline?
Yes, so absolutely. And before I let you all go, I just want to let you know, I did sit on the Disability Advisory Board. I'm well aware of all the commissions and advisory and all the avenues. I'm just speaking in terms of what if, given what your purview is on this new subcommittee. And I applaud the city for finally introducing a subcommittee on racial and social justice. It's well overdue.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Any additional comments from the public? All right, with that, we want to hear from the City of West Hollywood's Business Development Division regarding the economic incentives for BIPOC, women-owned, LGBTQ-owned, and city resident small businesses in the City of West Hollywood. At this point, I'd like to call the city's manager's department. Who do I have that's speaking to this? Item number 6 on the agenda.
Good evening, Chair. My name is Paulo Kesperdit with the City Manager's Office, and I'll be doing tonight's presentation.
Great.
Great. Well, good evening, task force members. Once again, my name is Paulo Kesperdit. I'm the management analyst with the City of West Hollywood in the City Manager's Office, and it's my pleasure this evening to present to you with the support and incentives for BIPOC, women, LGBTQ, and city resident-owned small businesses. What I'm going to try to do is share my screen here so that all of you can see my presentation. And you should be able to see that on your screen there. So before I kind of dive into the meat and potatoes of today's discussion, I just want to go over a little bit of background in regards to Council's direction with regards to this program. Back in early January of 2021, the City Council directed us staff to study possible support or incentives for small businesses owned and operated by Black, Indigenous, and people of color, women, LGBTQ people, and West Hollywood residents. As you can see on the screen here, the City Council gave staff 2 very clear and specific directions. One is to work with the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce to identify ways the city can incentivize and support BIPOC women, LGBTQ people, and West Hollywood residents to maintain an open business in West Hollywood. And finally, to report back to the City Council on how these recommendations for how to support these types of minority-owned businesses in the city. Additionally, within the City Council's initiated report, it was directed for staff to also reach out to the Social Justice Task Force with the city's potential work plan to support and incentivize these businesses in the process. So for tonight, during the presentation, our request for the Social Justice Task Force is obviously to receive the report and provide staff with any feedback that might be applicable to that as we kind of prepare for this item to go back to council sometime in late fall and early winter. We're trying to do it sometime before the end of the year, but just kind of lining up our dates here. The work plan that you'll see before you this evening, and that's also attached in the staff report, is divided into 3 phases. Those phases are the short term, the medium term, and long term, with pretty general timeframes outlined in each term. The reason why we separated everything into short, medium, and long term is that some of the items that we are presenting for your consideration tonight are items that are a little bit more complex, that require additional policy discussions, as well as additional resources from city departments and could be other stakeholders and organizations that are both in West Hollywood and around the West Hollywood community. So looking at our short-term work plan, that's basically from 1 to 6 months. The first item would be to create a dedicated city webpage. So this webpage is something that it would be similar to something that we've done for our coronavirus updates to the business community. This would be almost like a one-stop shop for information in regards to local, state, and county resources. That might include grants, that might include special assistance, special webinars, but just a dedicated city webpage as a one-stop shop access for businesses. The next item on here is a creation of a certification process for BIPOC women, city resident, LGBTQ owned small businesses. This certification program is kind of the foundation and the starting point for the program. And all of our research that we've done looking at other cities, both in California and outside of California, this was kind of like the underlining factor to basically show that you are a majority owner if you fit in one of the categories, which is BIPOC women, city resident, or LGBTQ owned businesses. How this would primarily work is we would partner with organizations to verify the status of the business ownership and verify that they are 51% ownership of that particular business to qualify for any one of the programs that we're going to kind of list through the specifically medium and also the long-term proposals. Next would be to conduct a needs assessment. This would be a staff-driven initiative, basically outreach to local businesses to provide a sort of baseline analysis of the current business climate and what potential barriers or what the city could do from the businesses who are currently in the city's perspective to increase awareness and assist businesses during this time. And then finally, we'd want to amend the city's business tax certificate. The business license tax certificate was moved online, same with the payments during the coronavirus pandemic. However, there are some missing pieces of information that staff would like to explore further to provide some data and information to help us in our research as we start to compile a more robust program. Also allow us to provide information upon request when our team gets particular questions in regards to data that we can't necessarily answer at this time. So we'd want to amend the current business tax certificate to include some questions that might include demographic questions. It might include business ownership questions that would kind of have some synergy with the certification process on the short-term goal.
How would you like for us to provide feedback? Would you like for us to wait until you're done or do a long, short, medium, and long term? What's your preference?
Maybe, if it's the preference of the chair, probably if just continuing the presentation, it's really short, probably have 2 or 3 other slides. I like short presentations and then we can respond after. So looking at the medium term, that's 18 to 24 months. The first item on there is partnering with the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce's 501c3 foundation. The West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, through the past few months, especially during the pandemic, would like to start up this foundation. And the city has been in some preliminary meetings with them, but we'd like to continue the collaboration in a more formal process to assist the Chamber's Foundation. And their main mission is to provide resources to BIPOC entrepreneurs and also access to capital because they have the resources with private companies to do this type of work. The second item on there is exempt business license tax fees for year 2. So currently when you open up a new business in the city, you pay your $29 fee, which is your business fee that every business pays for a business license tax. And then year 1, you are exempt from those fees. And then year 2, you pay 50% of your year 2 fees. What this proposal will do is provide also an exemption for year 2 with a full repayment of 100% of taxes in year 3. So basically 2 years of exemption taxes with the year 3 of the actual tax going through. The next item on here is payment installment plans for planning department permits. So these are a plethora of permits. What we really wanted to focus on here and what we outlined in the staff report are more of those high dollar value permits. While a $100 permit is one thing, a $9,000 major conditional use permit's a totally separate animal. And staff's recommendation is to look at payment installment plans for those type of larger permit fees to hopefully lower the barrier for businesses to open up in the city. And then also conduct mentoring webinars and workshops to assist in opening businesses. There are quite a few organizations out that specialize in this, especially for the BIPOC, LGBTQ, women, and city resident-owned business community. And we would reach out to them to provide some type of partnership to help us target to West Hollywood businesses or entrepreneurs who are interested in opening up a business. And then work with the city's financial institution to provide or explore providing low-cost funding or low-cost loan options. We have our current vendor, which is Bank of the West, and we could start conversations regarding to finding some access to capital through Bank of the West. And then finally, on the medium-term item here is the rewards program to support businesses. This is a basically incentive program for the community and visitors to shop at certain businesses who might fall within this category, and that might provide some type of discount, might be some type of voucher, but that would be city sponsored through this process. And then finally, for the long term, which is the longer policy kind of discussions here, one is going to be a set aside for businesses and new private developments. So this is something that is a little bit more complex. When a new development comes into the city could, during the development agreement process or the public benefit process, ask that a portion of their commercial property be allocated to businesses who fall within this category. So that is kind of one policy discussion. It kind of goes around the September, I think it was the 20th council meeting that the council approved the create affordable commercial spaces and new commercial and mixed use projects. It kind of has some synergy with that item there. So that's kind of the premise on the first item. Second, prioritize businesses and city-owned vacant storefronts. So, right now we have, off the top of my head, 2 that I could think of. One is at the council chambers that there used to be a coffee shop there. Prioritizing a business that categorizes in this and in that space. And then also in West Hollywood Park and the new building, the aquatic center that's opening up, there's also kind of like a small, for better term, hut that's there that we could prioritize businesses and those type of city-owned vacant storefronts, as well as looking at our entire stock of city-owned properties to see what type of businesses we could fit where. And then finally, conducting a disparity study. So this is to just basically determine if any inequalities exist in public procurement processes. That could be contracting and looking at if there's any type of discrimination of any against any specific business or business type. So that's pretty much it for the presentation. It's quick and simple, but I really wanted to take the time to hear the task force and answer any of your questions.
Anybody have questions or comments? Zamopa?
Thank you. I do want to just flag, since I'm not on the subcommittee that specifically discusses this, if there was somebody on that subcommittee who wanted to speak first, just wanted to throw that out there before I chime in.
I'm on that subcommittee, but I've talked a lot, so I'd love to hear your voice. So
Perfect, sounds good. Hi, Paolo. I'm Daniel Zamopa, he, they pronouns, vice chair on the Social Justice Committee here. I am not as familiar with opening a business or a storefront here in West Hollywood, so I do apologize if a few of my questions are not as informed. But for the small business owners that I do know that have had businesses here in Los Angeles, a lot of the times in West Hollywood, a lot of times the thing that I continue to hear is their rent getting raised by business, the landlords of that building. What is, if any, the city's involvement in situations like that?
So the city and specifically our team, we don't necessarily get too involved in rental rates. It's more of a private agreement between the landlord and the tenant. That being said, we have had conversations with some landlords specifically, during the COVID pandemic when there were a lot of businesses, or I guess an increased number of businesses that were closing during that time, having conversations on the kind of makeup that the new tenant would be in there looking at rates. But the market kind of justifies and looks at the rates for these particular businesses, and the city necessarily can't get involved in those particular contract agreements, which is why on the long-term initiative on here, we looked at the vacant storefronts as being an option because the city can control rents for properties we own. So that would be looking into those more options more carefully.
Gotcha, that makes sense. And I guess my is there opportunity to, again, I have personal thoughts on this, but have discussions with landlords in terms of incentives for their buildings that they own, if they were to offer either their own incentives or rent stabilization for BIPOC marginalized group businesses that open up, especially in those vacant storefronts?
Yeah, so as part of this last council meeting, the council directed staff to kind of look at incentives in ways that landlords could assist with the mediation portion of businesses who currently have a business in West Hollywood. And certainly I think a lot of those initiatives that we are currently working on or looking to explore could be brought into this kind of fuller work plan document as more of those permanent things. There's not necessarily, and I kind of want to make sure that I'm being honest, is that there's not necessarily a lot of initiatives that the city could potentially do. There are things that are within our control, like we could look at faster permits. We could look at a few things like that. But in regards to a lot of times we hear like taxes, like that's not something the city has any control of, especially because that goes to the county.
Copy that. Thank you for the additional information. Appreciate it.
great. Thank you. Giselle?
Hello, Paula. Thank you for your awesome presentation. I have a two-parter for you. I'm wondering if there's any exclusions to business types to participate in this, and then curious about how awareness is being created with the thought that sometimes the businesses that need it the most don't hear about these opportunities. So wondering about the communication on that, please.
Yeah, so this is still within, I would like to say, the more early phases of the work plan. This is kind of an opportunity for us for staff to explore not only with the task force, but with some commissions and advisory boards, our thoughts of how this should go before we go to the council. Once council blesses this work plan and approves it, that's when the more communication marketing piece of it will go. But within this time as well, we're marketing to the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, the LA LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce for their input, and also to ask their members what are things that they're hearing about. We are, and as I said before, as they kind of bless this, we'll do a press release. We'll do kind of like the whole communications outreach to make sure that businesses understand that this is happening. We'll also be posting this information on our website as well, on that dedicated webpage, so that people have a one-stop shop to see what we're working on at all times. And then also to answer your first question on if there are any businesses that are excluded from this. So no, this would not exclude any particular business. This is definitely geared towards the BIPOC, LGBTQ, the women-owned, and the city resident-owned. So if you don't fall under one of those categories, the initiatives and support is not going to work for you. However, those businesses that fall in those categories, those business types are eligible. However, some businesses, I can give an example for one. One could particularly be the payment installment plans for planning and development permits. Like a home-based business wouldn't necessarily need that because they're not building anything.
All right, thank you.
So I have lots of comments, but I'm going to wait until Krupa's side goes. So Krupa.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thank you as well for this. I recognize that there is a needs assessment, like a further needs assessment contemplated in the short term, but it sounds like you've also done some of that analysis and making some of these recommendations on what levers we can pull in terms of barriers to entry for BIPOC businesses. Daniel's question made me curious. What are the other barriers that you feel we are, how do I say this? Are levers we cannot pull? In other words, when Daniel's asking you the question about space, right? And, we can't totally get in the way of landlords who are going to raise the rents and kick folks out, what are the other places where you're like, we don't have a lever there? And I'm asking that with the lens of thinking about, okay, so then which ones do we have, right? Recognizing that otherwise Lance Bass is going to just own everything in WeHo.
Yeah, I definitely think there are two, in my opinion, there are two main barriers to entry in West Hollywood. And the first overarching one, I think, is access to capital is the biggest barrier to entry in opening a business in West Hollywood. West Hollywood is a business which commercial market rates are quite high because we are surrounded by Beverly Hills, surrounded by Hollywood, and kind of in a central place where all this activity can happen. And we're also a destination city. We're a creative city which people want to flock to and open up a business. And a lot of times for mom and pop type businesses, getting a loan from a bank is quite difficult. So that's something that necessarily the city of West Hollywood can't provide is, general dollars, specific dollars to businesses to open up in the city. For instance, if we gave $1,000, that really wouldn't do much for business to open up in the city. They would need a lot more money to do so. So I think that's kind of the first big lever. Going with that, and to Daniel's point, is also the commercial market rates. That's something that isn't driven by the city, isn't necessarily have anything through us. It's just driven by the market and the way in which that we see there are still tenants that are willing to pay these rates. So if they're willing to pay those rates, the market's just going to keep going higher. So I think those two are probably going to be the biggest barriers to entry.
Cool. Does that answer your questions? Great. So I have a few questions for you. By the way, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. One of the questions I had, so I think of a barrier to entry with the way that we may ask for people to pay their taxes or to pay the fees. Has there been a thought around accepting non-traditional forms of payment, such as like Venmo or PayPal or Cash App? for business owners to do, because sometimes they may owe so much money in their bank account that they might have the money in Venmo. So is that an opportunity for us?
I think that's something that, we can explore. We just, I think, fully moved over to electronic payments. So, while for us, the pandemic has definitely caused a lot more innovation electronically. There are still some areas we could potentially look at to see if, for businesses to pay these certain fees in another way. And I think you bring up a good point on that.
Another question is around the business tax certificate. I think it's a very creative way to identify demographics from an ownership perspective. One of the big things that we're focused on is equity across the organization. And what that looks like could be, what are the number of BIPOC, women, LGBTQ, and city residents in leader positions in these various organizations? Is that something that we could also consider adding to the city's business tax certificate?
I think we can definitely talk to our finance department and our team about it. I think there are a lot of large or some minor adjustments we want to make to the business tax certificate. I think the only question with that would be that leadership changes quite often in these businesses. So we'd just be trying to keep up to date with that and how is that done. Obviously, they file a business renewal every year. So we can potentially look at that as a question.
And then the other piece here also, I do want to be cognizant of what we just heard from our public speaker. And in some places, they actually have a disability or an advantage for disabled businesses. Is that a consideration that you've thought about for the people that might be disadvantaged?
For this particular item, no, because council's direction was specific in BIPOC, women, city resident, and LGBTQ
That's
businesses.
Fair. That's fair. Thank you. Okay, and then that was for the short term. For the midterm, a few more questions. In addition to the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, there might be others that are providing services to BIPOC entrepreneurs. I would just encourage us to really look into that. LAGLCC might be one, Los Angeles, even the Los Angeles area Chamber of Commerce. That's one thing. And same thing with conducting the mentoring webinars and workshops. Love to maybe work on trying to get a full list on that. Another piece is, has there been any thought around having a West Hollywood Small Business Expo, similar to how the city of Los Angeles does that for Small Business Week, where they have, and that's where it gives people access to potential loans that they would not otherwise qualify for, as well as other ways to help them be successful.
Yeah, let me kind of, sorry, I was writing some notes here. Let me kind of address all of those notes on there. So definitely, there are other partners out there that provide funding and services, or I should say services, to BIPOC, LGBTQ, and women-owned businesses. Definitely, when we mentioned the Chamber of Commerce is something that we mentioned in the medium term because they're obviously in West Hollywood, and we've been partnering with them for the past few years on other items, and this just kind of seemed like an easy way for us to further engage with them. With the conducting mentoring workshops, definitely we're in conversations right now with the LA LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce to look at some of their initiatives and bringing it as part of this work plan, as well as the Small Business Majority and the LAEDC. There are quite a few organizations that provide this type of mentoring and assistance to minority-owned businesses, as well as other types of businesses. And looking at the Los Angeles Expo Week, I'm not quite familiar with that, so we'd have to dig in a little further and kind of come back with recommendations on that.
Yeah, I definitely have a few people you can connect with from the city of LA if you'd like that.
Great, thank you.
the other piece for conducting a disparity study, I love that idea so much. Does it have to be 3 to 4 years out? It really aligns with some of the things that we want to accomplish on the Social Justice Task Force, as well as some of the questions that our member Krupa Desai has brought up. And I think there's some real synergies there in the way that we're thinking. I'm wondering why it has to be 3 to 4 years out, because I think there's a big need to ensure equity among the vendors from a public standpoint.
Certainly, I think we can definitely look at moving the disparity study at least to the medium term. I would be hesitant to move it to the short term section because we kind of gave ourselves 6 months to accomplish that, and obviously we want to conduct a appropriate disparity study that can accurately analyze the current climate of West Hollywood businesses. So I don't want to rush necessarily any particular study. We can definitely look at it as the medium term, but staff's initial thought on this is that it might take, by the time we find a consultant to conduct some study, do an RFP, might take probably 6 months to do that, and then probably a year and change to actually do a program. So 3 years out, but we certainly can probably move the disparity study to the medium term.
And maybe there's some recommendations that we as Social Task Force come up that might help you in that effort. I don't know what that is. I'm just speaking, saying ways that we can synergize. I don't know. But thank you for entertaining my questions and the team's questions. So and thank you for the report. So it's great. Any other comments or questions? I think, Zakiya Wright.
Hi, Zakiya Wright. I am, sure, I'm on the Lesbian and Gay Advisory Board, but speaking tonight in the individual capacity. So I guess the two questions that I had, I see the city is, prioritizing, starting this, and you've already identified that access to capital has been an issue for a lot of businesses to start up. And so I'm wondering why in the proposals there isn't the city actually investing, right? The city's, I don't see where the city's actually giving money. I'm in the process right now of starting a business, and even for like SBA-backed loans and other loans, it requires a 20% sort of buy-in, which depending on the amount of the loan could be upwards of $20,000. And so I'm just wondering, is there any discussions, I guess, first with the city offering money? And the follow-up to that was, if they're not willing to sort of give the money on a grant purpose, have they considered, a PPP style loan where businesses, if they stay in business or keep a certain number of people employed or whatever the case may be, in this situation, if it's a business starting, if they have certain revenue or if they've made, hit certain matrices about, contribution to the community or wherever the case may be, right? Then the loan is forgiven, but if not, or if they close down or whatever the thing is, then the loan has to be repaid. That's my first question. And I guess I'll give a minute to answer since that was a lot before I ask the second.
Chair, would you like me to answer the question?
Yes, please.
Yes, please answer.
So I guess just as a quick point of clarification, members of the public can make public comments regarding the item, and then the task force members can ask staff to respond to those items. But the task force members should be the ones directing staff to have questions, and the members of the public can make 2 minutes of public comment.
So I do think, Zakiya, that your comments are valid, and I also happen to be a business owner within the city of West Hollywood, and I would love to have Paolo weigh in. Would you be willing to weigh in on that?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think the speaker brings up some really good points. And definitely access to capital. As I said before, is a large barrier to entry in West Hollywood. That being said, the city of West Hollywood in general, I don't want to perceive us as a financial institution of some sort. When there are PPP loans like the SBA does, they have a full, department division dedicated to these type of resources. That's something in the city of West Hollywood we don't have. which is why we wanted to partner with our local financial institution, Bank of the West, to assist us in providing those type of resources to businesses. And looking at the actual money that we could potentially give a BIPOC-owned, LGBTQ-owned, women-owned, city resident-owned business is in the medium term, we look at exempting business license tax fees for year 2. That is a 50, basically in year 2, businesses outside of these categories would have to pay 50%. So the city would be exempting businesses who fall within these categories that 50%. So that's money, technically back in these type of businesses. The city, can do rebates and sorts like that, but we really don't hand money back out. That's something that would require a lot more dedicated staff to conduct that kind of service, and those are not resources we have right now, which is why we partner with institutions to provide these services to the community.
Thank you. Zakia, does that answer your question?
Sure. And then the second question that I had was sort of to the point of regarding the city not getting into the business of telling private landlord tenants what to charge. And so I'm wondering, and I'm thinking like in residential buildings, the city does have like a certain number of units that are set aside that are sort of income restricted. And so has the city given any thought to doing the same thing with commercial properties where there's sort of there is a certain rate that that commercial owners can't charge, or certain set aside they have to own, especially if they're they own multiple businesses or buildings within the city.
So my understanding that he spoke to that a little bit, but I'll have him reiterate. So Paolo, do you want to?
Sorry, I was just going to say too, we can follow up after public comment, like I mentioned before, is specifically just so people can give their comments to staff in the Social Justice Task Force. And it's simply just because we want to make sure we're transparent. So if there were folks who knew that we would kind of be having this conversation, it should have been listed on the agenda. So we can definitely work with Paulo to make sure we reach out to Zakia and get that information to her.
Yeah. So thank you. And I took the note that I need to be more directive in that way. So thank you. Okay. With that said, then I suggest that we move on to the subcommittee reports. And with that, I'm gonna move that Shayla's on. Shayla, do you want to speak to the economic development and city contracting? Economic community development. Shayla? Why don't we move into the second subcommittee, and we'll do the housing and homeless and social services, and I'll pull up the details for the first one. So housing and homelessness and social services. Who wants to speak to that? Who can speak to that? How about that? Is that Shannon?
Did you say Shannon?
Yeah, Shannon, are you on that one? The housing and homelessness?
I am on housing and homelessness, yes.
Can you speak to maybe the progress that you guys have made thus far, and maybe some outstanding questions that you may have, or some needs that you may have for us to all?
I think we went over with during our meeting, just things that we would like to see. I think everyone's kind of hit this wall where we're a little frustrated because everything's an assessment. So we kind of feel like we can talk about the assessments all we want, but how do we actually start doing things that actually come to fruition? So yeah. I'll let somebody else talk because I think I'm more annoyed than anything. So,
well, we don't want you annoyed. So, anybody else from that committee want to speak? All right. So then, why don't we move on to the public safety then?
I can speak to that, but I also defer to my other committee members. If you, that sounds great. Thanks, Kripa. Great. So we discussed a couple weeks ago. Jasmine, thank you so much for compiling all of the reports and summaries and sending those over last week. A lot of the discussions that we had been talking about are conversations that I think we've also circulated within this committee here. I also think that there are very fast-moving updates regarding one item in particular that we wanted to discuss, which was cannabis, non-violent cannabis-related crimes, which I believe if anybody had seen this morning, the city of Los Angeles has exploring dropping all charges for, I think, like 3 decades worth of charges within the county of Los Angeles. I think that this is a question for John Leonard and for Jasmine. Does that apply to the city of West Hollywood? How does that work?
Yes, so that applies to all of LA County. So that's the district attorney for Los Angeles County dropping any cannabis-related charges that were filed on behalf of the county. So yes, it would apply to anyone that had an LA County charge in West Hollywood.
Well, that is a big check off our list. But I obviously would love to continue to explore that conversation and just make sure that if there's anything that's related to the thoughts that we had in our subcommittee that we wanted to just make sure that by extension that it was covered within that larger decision. And then I know we did want to hear from the sheriff's office within West Hollywood. I know that report is currently being worked on, and there is a larger presentation being made. So I think we're just anticipating that before we have any more updates. Krupa, did I get everything?
I think so. I mean, basically, we were trying to clarify, like, who might we want to hear from and engage with, as well as our topics of interest. I guess my question is, to what extent are we just sort of reporting out versus also getting input from the task force for us to take back to subcommittee?
So that is the next agenda item. We start talking about the action plan.
That's right. Okay.
So, but we're on the same page in terms of how do we get to action,
Okay.
right? And I think I'll give a quick update so we can get there on the economic community development and city contracting piece. So as you may know, we actually put a hold on the city contracting RFP process while the attorney looks into a couple of things before we add that into our scope. So our scope initially right now is focused on economic and community development. And so we're thinking about businesses, residents, and making sure that we possibly might have innovation centers, areas where BIPOC businesses might be able to thrive and be invested in. We're looking at actually how do we analyze incentives or create incentives for us Hollywood businesses to hire diverse set of managers. We're looking at also ways that we can really increase of the BIPOC group. It seemed to be, or appeared to be, based on the numbers and the data, that the Black population was highly underserved within West Hollywood. And that's something that can't be ignored. And so the other piece that we thought about is, how do we look at providing the right funding for capacity building for small businesses and nonprofits? In terms of how do we lower the barriers for applying to city grants, for example. In addition to that, what can we do to also assist members of the BIPOC community who want to live in West Hollywood that can't afford to live in West Hollywood? And so there are some incentives that exist today. However, how do we make sure that that's being promoted to the right people, giving access to those voices? So there's a few things that we have on par or on point that we've really kind of thought through. We would like to hear from the Chamber of Commerce. We'd like to hear from BIPOC businesses. Also, we'd like to hear from businesses that serve BIPOC people as well, because that might make it more of a comfort zone. So Latinx and Asian Pacific Islander businesses we want to hear from. Definitely want to hear from BIPOC leaders in West Hollywood in terms of what struggles they see businesses facing. And then obviously we want to learn more around what we can do around innovation. So we want to have innovation centers and capacity building groups. And then also want to make sure that we're looking at some of the subcommittees and some of the other groups in terms of what they're focused on as well. So there are quite a few big items we want to tackle. We're trying to put some order around it and then identify kind of in a methodical way who we want to hear from and what kind of makes sense. And so, with that said, I'd love to go to the next agenda item, which is very much focused on our kind of action plan. And so what we've done is we've created a kind of spreadsheet that outlines, let me just pull it up really quick. I'm sorry, forgive me really quick while I turn but the idea is for us to walk through what does the next year look like, the roadmap to action, if you will. So, I'm pulling it up right now. And I'm sorry, forgive me for a minute, guys. In the meantime, I would normally never do this on a public forum, but I'm just going to go ahead and share. Oh, there it is. Here we go. I was about to share my desktop because I actually was getting tired of looking for it, but here we go. So what we've done is we sat back and we looked at exactly how we're working and what the city council quarterly updates look like, and think about how we can get to the point where we can start taking action kind of in bite-sized chunks. And so we want to get your buy-in and your perspective. So initially we're looking at city council updates between now and let's say the end of May, which is primarily the 1 year that we've had this in motion. We have the October update, which is coming up. We will have a January update. We'll have an April update, and we'll have the May, which is the year end kind of wrap up. But April would probably be the final report out, if you will. And then January can be another interim report out. Whereas October is just going to be saying, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's who we're looking to hear from. This is what our listening mechanisms look like. Then as we take a look at the foundational areas, right? So we've established what our 3 priorities are. We've discussed the considerations and guidance for advancing new ideas. We're currently, if we to think about it, we're currently in a listening phase, right? And, I think about, and this is, me being Jonathan here and not necessarily just chair. I think about the Shannons of the committee and the desire for action, as soon as possible. And so we want to make sure that we are not just listening, but we're thinking of the action plan that we can recommend along the way. And so that's the goal, is for us to walk through and identify who exactly we want to hear from. So we want to align task force members with some of the other committees. That's going to be in this packet as well that we've talked through. We also want to make sure that we're thinking of a list of topics that we want to hear about from various groups in the community. We also want to make sure that we are hearing comments and presentations from some of the city staff we may not have heard from. Also, community partners, right? So including some of the social service providers, business owners, educators, activists, and organizations / others. And then whatever we recommend in January, some of the city council members may come to us and say, you know what, go forth and conquer for the next few months on these items, or find out more on these items, while we continue to listen and move forward and putting together our final action plan. So I said a lot, and I'm going to sit back and pause for a minute and ask what your initial thoughts are on this timeline and structure. And I understand if you're still absorbing.
Can you say a little bit more about what 321 align task force members with other committees, what that means?
So in your packet in the back where it says item 10 attachment, this is where we get into, it'll be later on in our agenda. We're going to talk through the different task forces that exist, the commissions and the advisory boards. And ideally,
right,
all of us can be a dedicated kind of report out for these various groups. And that's something that the city staff will help us walk through in a little bit. So
that's right. Okay. That's helpful reminder. I do remember seeing that. I think like the itch I'm trying to scratch is related to the question I asked before, which is like the subcommittees, you know, obviously we are and are going to do good work and have good thoughts and good recommendations on the things that the subcommittees want to work on. I'm wondering what the feedback loop is before, like, is it the subcommittees put together the whole year plan and then get feedback, or like we have all these ideas of people we want to hear from and then that just goes in the master list? Or is there a way for us to incorporate the thing, like start with the recommendations that people reported out on, get some input, and then does that make sense?
Yeah, I think John and I were going to say the same thing, but I'll let John speak first.
I'll be brief since we're probably saying the same thing. Yes, the goal of subcommittees would be to formulate thoughts and do work and then bring it back to the full task force for discussion, because ultimately the policy recommendations and the overall recommendations going to the city council are from the task force as a whole. So the task force needs to provide input and agree upon those recommendations coming out of the subcommittees. But the subcommittees are really meant to kind of do a lot of that work and then bring it back to get feedback from the task force. So I would recommend bringing forward ideas, thoughts, getting feedback, taking them back to the subcommittee, working on them a little bit more, and then kind of bringing those final recommendations for full task force approval.
Got it. Along the way. That's sort of what I was going to check for.
And there's a couple things that we're thinking about doing to help facilitate this process a little bit more, which is one, we're going to provide a template for the subcommittees to leverage for that city council update in October. And then two, so we can really help these report outs. We can provide you kind of an overall template in terms of what are the hot topics, what are the things that you're thinking about, what are some areas that you need help with, so that we can make sure we're moving the needle in that way. And so that's kind of the thought process. So stay tuned on that. But in general, does it seem like the general direction we want to go? Is there anything that we're missing?
I was just going to suggest that we integrate the action plan and some of the things we listed out for the months of October, November, and December. So that way the task force members can include that. Yep. Okay, so I will share my screen really quickly.
Yep, and I will stop sharing.
Okay. Thanks, Jonathan. Sorry about that. Hold on. Okay, let me know if you can see the screen. Can everyone see my screen? Yep. Okay, great. So we've been updating the action plan so that way, if folks want to look back, you can easily see what we covered in our previous meetings. but for the purpose of this conversation, specifically for the moment that we're in now moving forward, John mentioned this earlier, but the subcommittees between September and October will continue to meet. The stakeholders, organizations, activists, folks that you all want to hear from, you will continue to hear from them and allow those conversations to refine the areas of interest that you will be focusing on for the policy recommendations. Staff will be presenting a quarterly update to City Council at the October 18th City Council meeting. For the October 26th task force meeting, the task force will receive a presentation from the city's strategic initiatives division in regards to the city behavioral health crisis response unit. And for the months of October and November, the subcommittees will still continue to have those listening sessions. Listening sessions can also take place at the subcommittee level, and during those reports, the subcommittees can discuss and update that information with the task force. At the November 23rd meeting, the task force will explore giving the responsibility to the subcommittees with coordinating pop-ups. So before we had this discussion of how do we make sure we're hearing from the community? How do we make sure we get that pulse? And staff is recommending that pop-ups may be a good way to do that. Each subcommittee will obviously schedule a pop-up based on members' availability and gather feedback specifically related to that subcommittee. And the subcommittees will report back on the initial recommendations and feedback that they have for the task force.
Jasmine, the only thing I don't see on here also was for the October 18th, we were going to send a template to them for their feedback by October 4th or by October 5th, and then ask for their responses by October 12th so that we can aggregate and have something as kind of a voice, a unified voice.
Okay, I'll make sure to note that in the minutes. And I'm sending. What we'll do is we will make sure that once staff has kind of prepared that update, we can send that out to the subcommittees. And on the subcommittee level, you all will be able to provide feedback back to staff if there are things that you think we missed or things that we need to include. We can incorporate it that way before we present to City Council. Thanks, Jonathan. So again, between November and December, again, the subcommittees will continue to meet, hear from stakeholders, and for the month of December, we'll make sure to continue to invite staff, whether it's departments that you all haven't heard from, or whether it means that there are now different sides of an issue that you all want to tackle, or maybe you want to tackle a subject matter in depth. We can still invite departments that we've heard from if there are new issues that come up or new concerns. Let me know if there are any questions before I continue. Most of the rest is pretty self-explanatory, but we're pretty much trying to make sure that we give the subcommittees the room to really start to explore these areas. In the public safety subcommittee, a really good point was brought up that there may be folks that feel more comfortable attending a subcommittee meeting than they do a social justice task force meeting. So if there are individuals or organizations, folks that you are aware of who would feel more open to attend a subcommittee meeting, let's make sure that we're still able to include those voices. because we can always have the subcommittees report back to the Social Justice Task Force. Are there any questions?
Just to make sure, I don't know, I know that we're clarifying as we go in some cases, right? But we definitely want to make sure we outline who we want to hear from in this next status update. That'll be part of the template, just understanding who each of you want to hear from. And yes, you can include people that you think could be direct people that you hear from in the subcommittees, but definitely want to just understand what the lot looks like.
Great. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you for leading that. The next piece was item number 9. And that's going to be about the community partners, business owners, community activists, service providers, and stakeholders of interest. I see a hand raised. I mean, or at least I saw it briefly. Jorge, do you have a comment or question?
Oh yeah. Well, I just wanna. I'm sorry. I wanna go back to my the committee that we have about homelessness and social service. Yeah, it was a good meeting, you know, but we were proposing, we were asking to the city hall because we understand they have a great social service program for different, they give support to different organizations. But what we were thinking right now, we were seeing that right now that, you know, it's a big problem right now, the homelessness in West Hollywood, Los Angeles, everywhere actually. Yeah, we were giving some ideas what we can do about, you know, how we can find some ways to help, because it's too many people out there that, you know, they need our support. Like there are different ways. Like we were talking about different kinds of homelessness. You know, it's not just one time. It's people that they do drugs, people, you know, different for different situations they don't have a place. There are different ways to try to finish with this kind of problems. You know, like today I was in this at the city hall in Los Angeles. You know, we were talking about we were trying to support about to finish, not finish, you know, but regulate the Airbnbs, you know, because we know the short-term rentals are a big problem right now because they taking houses, or they taking apartments that they should be rented for people that and long term, you know, because they taking spaces, they taking houses, they taking apartments, they taking jobs too, because you know what they taking the jobs that hotels should be having. You know, that's why we have hotels in the city so people can come to LA. But right now, the Airbnb is a big industry that's taking space from all people in Los Angeles. That's why we have right now a big problem with to find places, you know, to rent, and the prices are high. So it's different things that people can do to try to end with homelessness, like a prevent, you know, like a put regulations to these places, because like I said, they taking space from people. These people that they lose their apartments or houses because, you know, they've been pulling out to start making this kind of business. At the same time, yeah, we were talking about, you know, what we can do in West Hollywood to try to support or make things better for homeless in the city. We propose some things, you know, like we saw that in other cities and other places, they have like showers, you know, places that a person can stop by, you know, feel fresh to do something. We propose to have a place like a, you know, like a gym or a locker room where homeless can, you know, live their staff there, because sometimes the reason that they don't go to a shelter is something because they carry with a lot of stuff and they don't know where to put it. So actually, I think that since we are just a subcommittee, and I understand we are a big group because we are just a task force. We would think, well, I was thinking you guys can support us, give more ideas, present to the city hall, to West Hollywood. So what we can do to try to find a solution for this, because this is not just West Hollywood problem. This is a LA problem, actually, USA problem, because it's not USA. There are some places they don't have this big problem. But like I say, it would be good to try to all together you guys can support us, because this is an issue that it's we see that every day, everywhere, wherever we go. Like today, I went to downtown for LA City, for the city hall, and the way I was like, oh my God, there were homeless everywhere, in the hills, under the bridge, it's everywhere. We don't have that much in West Hollywood. We can see the people, passing by, but we need to understand that these people like us, they have a family. They did have a family at some point, because for what I see, they might don't have it. But like I said, we have the meeting before, but maybe, I was thinking that you guys can give us some ideas. Trying to, give this idea to the city hall, so we can, because we understand that the city hall do a lot of help in social service. They help other places, but for what is about West Hollywood, we really don't have a big thing for homeless people.
Yeah, so thank you for all of that. That's very, very helpful background. One of the things that would be nice would be to take those comments and maybe think through what are a few of the key themes or messaging that you want to drive towards, and maybe that's something that we can help fine tune as a team, right? Because we all have different perspectives. It's a matter of just making sure that we can come out with something really tangible.
Yeah, as a team, sorry to cut you off. So as a team, I am on Jorge's team, and I think what we were trying to get out that is frustrating is things that are tangible, right? So if, Jorge mentioned these things about backpacks in our last meeting, things about how people don't have places to store things. Maybe we could have gyms. We have a lot of ideas. And I think what we were trying to get at is the people that we need to talk to, if you're trying to figure out who we need to talk to get immediate or more immediate response, would be social services, right? Mm-hmm. How do we make it? You guys say you already have these things, or these things are implemented, is what we were told during our meeting. But how do homeless are unhoused? How do other people know what social services are already there for them? We're not doing a good job at that, I don't think.
Absolutely right.
So that is what he is trying to say. And I think that's what you're trying to say, Jorge. I won't speak to you, but that's what I got. And I'm on your committee. And
I want to say thank you, Shannon, for that also, because again, understanding who you want to talk to and getting maybe names of those organizations might be helpful also, because it might enable John and Jasmine to help bring those people to our next meeting. And so that's what we're looking at. So we'll have a little box where you can put in whoever you want to hear from.
Yeah, I think we wrote some of those. I think we wrote a few of them down last time with the social services, because we were thinking the only way we actually can get these things up and running and off the ground. I know we're only here for comment, but if you're on the ground, you see what you can do, and it's social services. And how do we get the people the access? I know it's not a marketing campaign, but if I put something on Instagram and I'm like, hey, I'm going to be here with food, I get people there because they need food. What can West Hollywood do better to have people access the social services that you already provide? That's what the whole main goal was.
The one thing that comes across very strong when you talk is your desire for impact. And I'm on the train with you. So yes, heard loud and clear. Any other comments? Okay, so then going back, so we'll circle back to within the next couple of weeks. Want to hear exactly who you want to hear from, kind of written down in that kind of report out. That would be something that would be really helpful for us, because then also it'll help us with our planning for the next October meeting and November meeting. We can get people like locked in for those meetings. They might be a little bit longer than expected, but we can get people locked in. The next, and that was agenda number 9. Is there anything else that Jasmine or John, you wanted to say for that?
So for the next meeting, we're going to actually have our strategic initiatives division back. You've seen them before. They lead our homeless program. One of the other programs they're going to be leading or looking at implementing is a behavioral health crisis unit that would replace the sheriff's department for certain calls. So if somebody is experiencing a mental health crisis, whether they be housed or unhoused, this potentially 24/7 response team that includes a licensed clinician, a social worker, and others would respond instead of the sheriff responding. So they're going to provide that overview, which was the general direction to move forward with. This was approved by the city council in August, and it was specifically directed for it to come back to the social justice task force to hear an overview and provide comments and thoughts on that. So that was one of the divisions that was going to present to us. If there are other specific groups that the entire task force would like to hear from at that meeting, we would like to hear that, and we can schedule those. Otherwise, I think if there are individuals the subcommittees want to hear with, we can certainly schedule those for the upcoming subcommittee meetings. It's sometimes easier to get someone to just show up for a specific meeting with only a few people than the full task force meeting. But so I think those are the tracks that we're on right now. And so we'd like to hear if there's anybody else, and we don't have to do it specifically tonight, but if there are suggestions for others, both at the subcommittee level and the task force level, we are open to hearing that from the task force members.
Thank you, John. And the next piece was going to be around the city, understanding who we want to hear from the city. And I just want to say thank you for that page 7, which goes into the city structure, as well as talks about the commissions and advisory boards. I'm going to ask your opinion on this, John and Jasmine. Is there value in asking people which commissions or advisory boards they want to serve on now, or should they just submit their preferences to you, and then offline we just come back with like an assignment or some sort? So what's your preference on that? Is it dialogue now?
And just to clarify the purpose of the liaison, so this would be a task force member that would listen to and attend the meetings. They wouldn't be a member of the advisory board or the commission. They would simply be someone listening to the businesses that is going on at that advisory board or commission for probably the first 1 to 2 meetings that they attend. Afterwards, then they would start to liaison directly with that board or commission as we bring forward recommendations as a task force. So let's say the Economic Development Subcommittee brought forward a couple of recommendations that the task force agreed with. And we also now wanted to go get the feedback of the Lesbian and Gay Advisory Board on something very specific. That liaison could go and present that item to the Lesbian and Gay Advisory Board, get their feedback, or get their feedback from a subcommittee of that board, and then bring it back. So that's kind of the relationship when needs from those advisory boards or commissions come up. This would be the task force member that would go and liaison with that board or commission, but then also just keeping abreast of what's going on with that board or commission. If something pops up that's interesting, contacting them to be involved in that conversation.
Stated much more eloquently than I did, so thank you.
So to get back to the original question, I think we can do it either way. If we could, I think if we want individuals to send in which advisory board or commission they prefer, we would just probably ask that it be quickly within the next week or so that we can sort that through. But it may be fruitful to just go through tonight. I will say that the advisory boards are probably to some extent more important than the commissions. Yep. The commissions end up doing actually business of the city in terms of approving development projects or hearing rent stabilized hearings or hearing business license commissions hearings. So there's not as much direct feedback that some of those commissions can necessarily provide because they're not necessarily an advisory body. They're an actually quasi-judicial body that goes in and makes determinations on behalf of the city.
So John, I hear a recommendation. I recommend that we go through them tonight. Daniel, what's your comment?
I wanted to see if we happen to have a schedule of when these meetings are. I know we're all very busy and I wouldn't want us to commit to a board that we couldn't actually make that meeting for.
Maybe it's a preliminary, okay, right? If you can't make the meeting, you can always switch out.
Or maybe
what we can
ask,
do sorry about that, John.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, maybe we ask for top 2 from each person and then we can send out when they traditionally meet. Each commission or advisory board meets once a month.
Sure.
I was just about to say, yeah, if we narrow down 2 or 3, I can always let folks know when they meet.
Okay, so I'm going to read out the advisory boards. You guys should have it. It's page 7 of the Social Justice Task Force action plan. And so in that, the advisory boards that are listed are disabilities, lesbian and gay, Russian, senior, transgender, and women's. And maybe we can just go around and ask for your top 3. And Daniel, since you're first on the screen, maybe I'll just start with you. What's your preference for the top 3?
Sure. Disabilities, lesbian, gay, and transgender.
Great. And then Krupa, do you want to give me your 3?
Sure. I mean, again, mostly agnostic, but I would say disabilities, disabilities, transgender, and women's.
Okay.
And Jonathan, can I make a quick suggestion? Because I think that some of the commissions are important. I didn't want to say that the commissions weren't important.
No, we'll go through those next. Sorry.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking. Like I heard you in terms of let's go through it and let's really get people's thoughts now.
Great. Okay.
What I heard you with, and I thought we'd just do both. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So then.
So I didn't rank those 3.
Sorry.
I wasn't ranking. I was just reading.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. And then Giselle.
Gay and lesbian, women's, and disability.
Okay. And then Shannon.
Okay, so can I put gay, lesbian, women? I'm having I want to include disability. I feel like okay, so I'm going to start over. I'm going to go transgender, I'm going to go women, I'm going to go disabilities.
Boom.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Jorge?
Well, for me, it would be disability, gay and lesbian. But I would like to put transgender and woman at the same thing because I don't know why we make a difference.
I mean, it could be male to female, female to male, Jorge. I had the same problem because we have lesbian, gay. I think you just have to decide between the 2. I get the category thing though.
Great. And then
disability, gay and lesbian, transgender.
Great. And then Shayla, do you have a lean? I don't know if you're in a place where you can speak.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Just to clarify, so trans can definitely be male to female and also non-binary identified. So I would vote for disabilities, senior, and transgender.
Oh, we have a senior in the mix now. Marcus, I know you just joined. Right now, we are saying what our top 3 desires are to possibly serve as a liaison to other advisory boards for the city of West Hollywood. And those advisory boards are disabilities, lesbian and gay, Russian, senior, transgender, and women's. Do you have a lane for any of those 6 for top 3? Marcus? You did just join, so we'll give you a little break. Oh, lesbian and gay, senior. And that's it. Okay. Got it. Thank you for your voice. So to John's second point was the commissions are also very, very important. And so maybe we just do top 2 for that, because there are 9 commissions and there's 9 of us. So maybe we just do top 3 again, since we're to be consistent. And I'll go in the same order. Daniel, what are your top 3 for commissions?
Transportation, public safety, and arts and cultural affairs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then Krupa?
Arts and cultural affairs. I think Daniel and I, anyway, arts and cultural affairs, public safety, and planning.
Slightly different.
I know, right? There's what I always just.
It's like tattoo on my right arm instead of left arm. Just kidding. Giselle.
Same as Krupa, so public safety, arts, and I believe planning.
Okay, cool. Shannon. Shannon, are you still with us?
Sorry, I'm on mute.
Right.
I'm gonna go arts and cultural.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to also see something in the like rent stabilization, in public facilities.
That's great. And then Jorge.
Public safety, public facilities, rent stabilization.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last one.
Rent stabilization.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, great. And then Shayla?
I would go for rent stabilization,
Mm-hmm.
public facilities, and arts and cultural affairs.
That's great. And then Marcus, if you want to, public safety, rent stabilization, and I didn't get the last one. So I'm going to pull it up in the chat for those of you on the phone or live. It's planning. It says public safety, rent stabilization, and planning. So that's what Marcus has volunteered for. And I realized that I didn't go on either one. So I'll give you my 3. And I would like to do for advisory board, I would like to do lesbian and gay, disability, and then I'll say women's. The commissions I'd like to be on would be business license, rent stabilization, and transportation. And I think outside of that, I think we've gone through both the advisory boards and commissions. We'll ask you for who else you want to speak to from the city in our little template that we'll send out next week. If you guys want to send that ahead of time, that's fine too, but we will be sending out a template to ask for that. Outside of that, I think we've gone through items 9 and 10. Anything else you want to add, John or Jasmine?
I think just for the liaisons to the advisory boards and commissions, Jasmine will go through, look to see who is interested in which ones. We'll look at the schedules, and then we'll give preliminary recommendations based on schedules that work for people on who will be the liaisons for those. And then certainly we can formalize that at the next meeting and make adjustments if we need to.
That's great. Thanks, John.
And if there are, I feel like there were some in each category that were not named. Will your recommendations include like someone should still be on that committee?
Sure. And yes. And there may be a couple of, I think we might have captured all the advisory boards. I think we may have missed a few of the commissions, but we'll see which commissions those were, because there may be a couple of situations where it may not be needed for one of those commissions, depending on what the ultimate purview is of them.
I'm pretty sure no one said Russian, so we might need to circle back on that.
Yep.
And I might be willing to, I don't know, take one for the team. So.
Yeah, and we may also want someone to at least frequent some of the meetings from the Human Services Commission. That may be something that you all are interested in. That I think that one wasn't mentioned either. So
I was surprised, Shannon, I got to say, I was surprised he didn't say Human Services. I really was.
I don't have my glasses on and I can only see a little bit right now. So like when I'm zooming in, I saw a few things and I lost my glasses, or else I would have gone with, I had too many things, to be honest. I probably had too many things.
We can include them in the recommendation.
I feel like that's like close to your heart. So it's like, it's almost like a natural fit, but I'm not gonna say you have to say that.
I also, when I'm looking at the thing, there was only on that screen that you sent me like a few options. I'm only looking at the screen. I don't have my computer. I'm on an iPad.
No
and
worries.
So I'm just like looking at what you see, but human services, everything. I think that we should be doing the most. And I think sometimes I joined this thinking that we were going to change the world, and I have to take a step back, but it doesn't mean I don't believe we can't change the world. I'm just looking at things and trying to see where we can make the most impact. And if it's in, transportation or wherever we decide that that's our focus, let's just do it 100%. That's all I'm asking.
You have enough heart for all of us. Yes, I'm with you 100%. I track. All right.
And the other thing that we'll look at, just to finalize that thought, is there are some natural synergies between certain subcommittees and certain commissions and advisory boards. So we'll keep that in mind with subcommittee members and the different advisory boards and commissions.
Thank you, John. The other piece is, I guess, item number 11 now. We're talking about items from the staff. So is there anything from Jasmine or John?
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure in regards to our future meetings, specifically for the months of November and December, our meetings will probably fall in line with the holidays for those months. So I wanted to make sure if the members were open to this. Technically, the November meeting falls on Tuesday, November 23rd, but folks may be traveling. That's the week of Thanksgiving. So wanted to see if you all were open to moving that meeting to the 30th, Tuesday, November 30th.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to move the November meeting to the 30th.
I will second that, Wilson. Oh, Marcus also seconds that. So all those in favor, Daniel, what's your vote?
Aye.
Jonathan, I approve. Krupa?
Aye.
Great. Giselle?
Aye.
Shannon?
Aye.
Jorge?
Aye.
Sheila?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. And for the record, Marcus in the chat has said yes. So it looks like we're moving the meeting to November 30th. Thanks, Jasmine.
Yes, and then for December, same thing. So that meeting falls on December 28th, that Tuesday. Again, I think that may pose a problem for folks. So we can either move the meeting up to Tuesday, December 21st, or we can meet that following week, Tuesday, January 4th.
I would recommend actually moving it to the 21st over the 4th, but
Aye.
Shannon, do you want to pose the motion?
I'd love to.
I second the motion.
All right, Daniel, so then you're
Aye.
Great. Krupa,
Aye.
Giselle,
Aye.
Shannon,
Aye.
great. Jorge,
Aye.
great. Shayla,
Aye.
and then Marcus, for the record, in the chat is a yes, and then I am a yes as well, an aye. So motion approved to change the December meeting to the 21st as opposed to the December 28th date. Good. Cool, Jasmine. All right, anything else?
That's it for me on my end, unless John has something.
And do I make a motion to adjourn the meeting? Is that how that works?
You don't have to make a motion. You can just state that the meeting will be adjourned to the.
Well, unless there's any other questions or comments from the team, I feel like we can adjourn. So adjourn. Enjoy the rest of your day and week, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Aye.